the Lifecycle Institute's webinar presentation for February, Pruning Your Inventory, Setting MRO Stock Levels. We have Doug Wallace, who actually kicked off this meeting. He is our materials management consultant with Lifecycle Institute, and he is going to introduce a very useful tool for you today. Would like for you to know that now the entire production team and our speaker are online. If you have any more technical questions, please send them in Q&A or in chat to the panelists. And if you have any comments, please feel free to just share them with all participants. So with that, Doug, people have waited long enough. Take it away.
Thanks, Tara. And as you can tell, my expertise maybe in materials certainly is not in web meetings, but I think we got everybody here, so let's get going. The article that the webinar is based on was originally written back in 2009 in response to a question that we get from our clients a lot. I mean, we get it all the time, and that is, how do I manage my inventory to balance service and investment? Now, to be fair, that's not exactly the way they put the question, but that's the gist of it. In every materials management class that we give, we ask participants what challenges they're dealing with and what knowledge or tools they expect to walk away with from the class to help address those challenges when they get back to their site. And invariably, we hear things like, how do I manage my inventory? How do I set my min-max levels? Basically, how do I know how much to keep in stock? It becomes obvious pretty quickly when we talk to those folks, they aren't worried about how to make sure they have enough material in stock. That's generally a given. Usually they've gotten to the point where their inventory is way too high and they're starting to get some unwanted help from outside the stores organization. And I've had more than one person say, well, listen, can't you just give us the secret formula? Well, sure. If you search the internet for reorder point calculator, you'll probably find a simple equation that's shown in the first bullet here on this slide. It simply says that your reorder point should equal your demand through the lead time plus any safety stock. Well, that's easy, so where's my easy button? The problem with this is that it assumes that you have known or fairly predictable demand, which, as we know, is generally not the case for MRO materials. This method is much better suited for production materials or maybe finished goods where you can project your demand based on a master schedule or on customer orders. Now, if you're really lucky, you might come across something that looks like the formula in the second bullet on the slide. And to be honest, I don't really know what it means, but apparently it involves something called stockout acceptance factors and a Poisson probability distribution. So it looks very impressive, but I have a physics degree with a math minor. If I can't figure it out, I'd be hard-pressed to try and convince anyone else to use it. You might also find links to a number of companies that will take your data and calculate reorder points for you. So many of these people claim to have statistical models and other mystical tools built into proprietary software that conveniently prevents them from sharing any useful information about how the calculations are done. So you really just have to trust them. And unfortunately, they almost certainly don't have access to key pieces of information about your part, such as criticality, the probability of failure, the reliability of your vendors, that kind of information. And most of them won't guarantee the results that they give you or take responsibility for stockouts or excess inventory caused by using their recommendations. Plus, it's not cheap. $1 to a line item is not unusual for this kind of a service. So what's the right answer? Well, I can't offer a 100% guarantee that I'm going to give you the perfect solution either. However, what I'd like to do is give you my suggested approach. It's not scientific. It's relatively simple and straightforward. It's a method that I've used myself in the past and I've coached others to use successfully with pretty favorable results. Now, most MRO parts are managed using an order point model. So to get everybody grounded, let's just quickly remind ourselves how this works. The vertical axis represents on-hand quantity, and the horizontal axis represents time. If you follow the blue line from left to right, the model illustrates how material usage causes the on-hand balance to decrease until it reaches the reorder point, at which time a replenishment order is released. Demand continues throughout the lead time while you're waiting for the replenishment order to arrive, and then when the replenishment order is received, the inventory increases in an amount equal to the reorder quantity, and the process starts all over again. And this model is straightforward, but there are a few inherent problems with it. First, demand is hardly ever steady like this, particularly for MRO parts. Some items might be used regularly, but in different quantities each time. Other items may be used only sporadically with long periods of time in between issues. And the theory still applies, but the model doesn't accurately reflect what's actually going to happen in the real-world environment. Second, the model is just a generic example used to graphically depict the basic order point theory. It can't be customized to represent the projected inventory for specific items based on their true anticipated demand, their actual lead time, or their actual reorder point and reorder quantity data. So without this information, it's almost impossible to assess whether you have the right stocking plan in place to balance service and investment. So what happens? Well, generally you take your best guess and you end up with all this stuff in your inventory, but you still never seem to have the stuff that people want. But if your recommended stocking quantities turn out to be too low, you'll find out in a hurry when you start to experience stockouts and you get involved in all the fun that's associated with emergency purchases and expedited deliveries and explaining lost production opportunities to maintenance operations in your plant manager. But unfortunately, by then it's too late, and there's so much focus on obtaining the required materials that a lot of times nobody thinks to go back and reevaluate the stocking level, so you run the risk of just perpetuating the problem. Now, on the other hand, if your recommended stocking quantities are too high, it usually takes a lot longer to notice, and service isn't an issue. Maintenance and operations aren't likely to complain about having too much in stock. So a lot of times these cases aren't addressed at all until inventory becomes a real financial liability, and then it's dealt with in a knee-jerk reaction by simply eliminating material without properly assessing the true need for it, or the potential impact on service if you get rid of the wrong things. And all that does is take a bad situation and just make it worse. And I used to struggle with these challenges myself, so one day when I had nothing better to do, I kind of developed a little tool to help manage these situations. I've shown it in our classes. I've used it to help coach some of our clients and even some of our fellow consultants, and now I'm going to share it with you. Hopefully you can see it's an Excel spreadsheet, but basically what it is, it's a tool that's set up so that with a few key inputs, you can quickly see how the order point model applies to a specific item. By changing the values, you can also see how the impact that each parameter has on service, investment, and cost. So let me explain the fields as I populate them with some sample data, and then I'll show you how you can interpret the results to optimize your stocking plan. So for the first example, we have the reorder point. As I mentioned earlier, the reorder point is the quantity at which material is reordered. So when an issue transaction causes the inventory to reach or go below the reorder point, the system will trigger a requisition or a recommendation to replenish the inventory. For this example, I'll use 14 pieces. The reorder quantity is the number of parts that are ordered each time, and this amount can be determined by an economic order quantity or EOQ calculation, a standard lot size or usage multiple, vendor minimum order quantity, or just whatever seems to make the most sense. In this case, I'm going to use a reorder quantity of 12 pieces. The lead time, well, it should be the time from generation of a requisition to receipt of material, but you have to be careful because more often than not, the quoted lead time from a vendor reflects the time from when they receive the purchase order to when they ship the material. So you have to make sure you build in additional time both up front and on the back end if necessary to properly model your inventory. For this item, I'm going to use 4 weeks for the lead time. Estimated requirements might come from manufacturer recommendations, from reliability-based analysis of failure probability, or it can just be a guess based on the anticipated demand or past history. The important thing here is that whatever method you use, it's the best guess you have available. For this item, I'm going to put in 100 per year. The unit cost is simply the purchase price of the item or the average cost in inventory. Here I'll use $10. And the on-hand, I hope I don't have to explain that, we'll put in 16 pieces. So as I populate the stocking parameters, you can see that the tool starts to build a projected inventory profile over a 52-week horizon. And you can see how the pattern repeats itself here, just like it did in the basic order point model. It also builds a projected investment profile, which is exactly the same data in dollars rather than quantities. And the only reason we separate the two graphs is just because it's easier to deal with them individually. Below the projected inventory profile, you'll see some inventory and investment details. So let me take a minute just to discuss these. The The maximum possible inventory is the quantity that would be on hand if there was no usage while we're waiting for the replenishment order to arrive. Now, although the model predicts steady demand during the lead time, it's not unusual for there to be long periods of inactivity, and we do have to consider this as a real possibility. Now, in almost all cases, the maximum possible inventory would simply be the sum of the reorder point and the reorder quantity. And that's the case here for this item, as the maximum possible inventory of 26 equals the reorder point of 14 plus the reorder quantity of 12. The maximum projected inventory reflects where we expect the on-hand balance to be after the replenishment order is received, assuming that there is usage during the lead time as the model predicts. In this case, the maximum projected inventory for this item is 19 pieces. You can see that reflected in the graph up here as well. The minimum projected inventory reflects where we expect the on-hand balance to be just before the replenishment order is received, again, assuming that there is usage during the lead time as the model would predict. This is essentially the safety stock quantity that was shown in the order point model. In this case, the minimum projected inventory for this item, or safety stock if you will, is 7 pieces. And again, you can see from the graph that the inventory is never projected to go below 7 pieces. The average projected inventory is essentially the midpoint between the maximum and minimum projected inventory. This will come into play a little bit later. And finally, the projected item turnover is essentially represents the number of times that the average amount of inventory is going to be issued throughout the year. The calculation is simply the estimated requirements, in this case 100 per year, divided by the average projected inventory, or 13 pieces, and that results in 7.69 turns per year. So what we can see here that may not be evident just by looking at the parameters themselves is that the minimum projected inventory of 7 pieces may be okay from a service perspective, but actually may be too conservative. Maybe it's not necessary to always have at least 7 of these in stock at any given time. The estimated usage of 100 per year averages out to roughly 2 per week, so the reorder point of 14 pieces causes us to launch a replenishment order with roughly 7 weeks worth of anticipated demand still in stock. If it really only takes 4 weeks to get this item, then we may be triggering the order several weeks before we actually need to. So what can we do? Well, maybe we could order fewer parts. I'll go back and I'll say, let's change the reorder quantity from 12 to 10. We'll order fewer parts each time. Well, that doesn't change my minimum projected inventory. That's still at 7, as you can see here. All we've done by ordering fewer parts each time is increase the order frequency, and you can see that reflected in the increased turnover, which is now 8.33. So let's go back and try something else. Well, I could change the lead time, but the only way to lower the minimum projected inventory is to increase the lead time. I'll show you that by changing the lead time to 5 weeks. We've lowered the minimum projected inventory to 5 pieces. The problem is we don't actually control the lead time, the vendor does. Now, if the vendor changes the lead time and you're using a wrong number, you should fix it, and you can see how that'll impact the model. But we shouldn't be changing lead times arbitrarily just to force an inventory profile. By the way, even if the lead times are changing, hopefully it's to make them shorter, not to make them longer. So again, let's go back and see what else we can change. Well, assuming you have a reasonable estimate of the demand, you shouldn't be changing that either. Again, if it's wrong, you should fix it. But we shouldn't be forcing the demand numbers. It should be what we believe it is. The unit cost really only impacts the investment and not the inventory, and the on-hand is what it is. So really the only thing we can change is the reorder point. So if I go back and change the reorder point on this item to 12, well, now the minimum projected inventory you can see here is 5 pieces. That's better, and it probably is still safe from a service standpoint. What if we would drop the reorder point to 10? Probably still okay. And as we further decrease it to 8, starting to get a little bit hairy, and at 6 or below, you can see that we start to run the risk of being out of stock on this item for at least a week at a time. Now, if you can accept that kind of risk, then this may be the right reorder point for this particular item. But if you can't live with that potential for a stock out, then you really need to go back and bump up your reorder point a little higher. You also need to keep in mind that even though you may not be able to change the price of the item, it should still be a consideration. The lower the price, the less it costs to purchase and store. So being a little conservative on a low-value item like this isn't really a big issue. Here we're really only talking about roughly $200 worth of inventory. You certainly don't want to risk an expensive shutdown for the sake of a couple inexpensive parts. So hopefully the projected investment profile and the investment and inventory details down below here should help you in making these choices. Now let's go take a look at another example. In this case, we have an item with a reorder point of 0, a reorder quantity of 1, lead time of 8 weeks. Estimated requirements are 2 per year. The unit cost is $2,500. $2,500. And the on-hand is 1 piece. This is a typical set of parameters frequently used for expensive and one-of-a-kind items. And the basic premise is, when we use the one we have, we'll buy another one. Well, it sounds like a simple, effective strategy, but what we see in the inventory profile is that there are significant periods of time where the inventory is at 0, and we're risking a stock out. Again, if this represents an acceptable level of risk, then maybe the reorder point's probably okay. But if not, you need to go back and readdress it to minimize the potential impact of a stock out resulting from unexpected demand during these periods of 0 inventory. Now, ironically, it's not uncommon for people to use this kind of a stocking plan for their critical spares, thinking that there will always be one in stock, and we can see clearly from the model that's not the case. If you always want to have one in stock, then you better have at least 2 sometimes. Now notice that in neither of these examples have we actually specified a safety stock as shown in the basic order point model. The reason for that is because it's the reorder point, the estimated demand, and the lead time that all combine to determine the minimum projected inventory, which I said is essentially the safety stock. So these first 2 examples focus on service, and as we've seen, it's the reorder point more than the reorder quantity that impacts service. Well, now let's take a look at a different kind of an example. For this third example, we have a reorder point of 6 pieces, a reorder quantity of 12, lead time of 10 weeks, estimated requirements are 25 per year, unit cost is $1,500 a piece, and the on-hand is 10 pieces. The projected inventory profile shows that the service level is probably okay. It looks like we always have at least 2 in stock. But what about the investment? The reorder quantity of 12 pieces causes the inventory to spike at a maximum level of 13 when the replenishment order is received. And you can see down here at $1,500 a piece, those 13 pieces represent $19,500 worth of investment. If the service level is okay, then we really don't want to change the reorder point. But look what happens if I change the reorder quantity from 12 to 10. Now the maximum projected inventory is only 11 pieces. And if I further reduce the reorder quantity down to 8 and then to 6, you'll see that there's still no impact on the minimum projected inventory. But the maximum projected inventory now is only 9 pieces. So reducing the reorder quantity from 12 to 6 hasn't impacted my service level, but it has reduced the maximum projected inventory level from 13 to 9. That's basically 4 fewer pieces sitting in inventory that we probably don't need. Now, as I mentioned back in the first example, changing the reorder quantity impacts the ordering frequency, and it does increase your ordering costs to place additional purchase orders. But not only does it cost money to buy and pay for these extra parts, it costs money to keep them in inventory. Now, carrying costs are a subject for another day, but it's not unusual to pay as much as 20% per year on the average value of your inventory, so we have to look at the impact there as well. With the reorder point at 6, and with the current reorder quantity of 6, the average projected inventory is also 6 pieces with a value of $9,000. If I go back to the original reorder quantity of 12 pieces that I had in there before, you'll see the average projected inventory was 8 pieces valued at $12,000. So by changing the reorder quantity from 12 to 6, I've also reduced my average projected inventory by 2 pieces or $3,000 of investment. At a 20% carrying cost, that represents potential savings of $600 per year just on this one item, and we haven't done anything that would affect service. Now, there's a trade-off here, but the cost of placing a purchase order should be known or can at least be estimated, so it should be pretty easy to determine how the cost of one or more additional purchase orders each year compares to the carrying costs associated with the extra inventory. In this case, it should be pretty safe to assume it's cheaper to generate one extra purchase order each year to save those $600 in carrying costs. Now, let me go back to my slides just for a minute, and I have a question for you. There you go. How many of you have a formal process in place to manage your stocking levels? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be formal, or at least somewhat formal. So what I'd like you to do, if you know how, is to go up and use your annotation or text tool to just put a check or an X or something in either the yes side, the yes column, or the no column, just so I can get an idea of who does and does not have some kind of a formal process in place. And while you're doing that, I will move ahead for the sake of time. Hopefully you can see that the concepts used to build these models, they aren't complicated, and in most cases the data required to do this type of analysis is readily available, yet generally people don't consider doing something like this when they request an item to be stocked. Typically what happens when a new item is set up is that the requester is asked to recommend min and max levels, and often whatever numbers are suggested are just accepted without question and entered into the database without any assessment of whether they're actually going to strike the proper balance between service and investment. So for those of you a couple of you I see that indicated that you do have a formal process for determining your stocking levels, I hope it isn't what I just described. I hope it's a little better than that. So the important thing is to make sure that you ask for the right information. Instead of asking people to suggest a minimum quantity, it makes better sense to ask how many could we possibly need at one time, or better yet, over a period of time, which would preferably be the lead time. Instead of asking people to suggest a maximum quantity, it makes better sense to ask, well, how long can we live without one? With this information, purchasing and storage can recommend the proper reorder point and reorder quantity that best balances service and inventory after considerations given to the cost, the lead time, criticality, and other external factors. So we've only looked at a couple examples here, but whether you're talking about new items or existing items, I hope you can see how a tool like this can help you interpret what will happen with a given combination of reorder point and reorder quantity values, and how it can quickly highlight a number of potential issues, both service-related and investment-related, that need to be addressed. So let's do a quick recap. The reorder point determines the lowest level that the inventory should reach, and therefore it's the primary driver of service. The reorder point should be based on an accurate assessment of the lead time along with a reasonable estimate of demand while considering the potential financial impact of a stockout. Now keep in mind that the lead time of an item can be reduced through vendor negotiations, consignment, or vendor stocking arrangements. You shouldn't try and establish the reorder point until you're sure you have the best lead time that you can possibly get for the item. The reorder quantity determines the frequency of replenishment orders, and it impacts turnover. It determines the maximum possible inventory, and therefore it dictates the amount of space that may need to be allocated for the item in your storeroom. It also impacts the average projected inventory of each item, and therefore it affects the associated carrying costs. Now, with any mathematical tool, the key to getting realistic output is to ensure the validity of the input. So before any set of reorder point, reorder quantity values can be properly validated, it's critical to verify the accuracy of the key planning parameters that are used in the model, particularly the estimated demand and the lead time. If these aren't right, then this tool, or for that matter, any other tool or methodology, can give you misleading results that could have potentially significant negative consequences. And the most important aspect of this model isn't determining whether you've arrived at the perfect stocking level, but that all the key stakeholders are engaged collectively in the process, and that means purchasing, stores, engineering, the requester, whoever else needs to be involved, and they all agree that the stocking plan properly balances service and investment, and that, you know what, if the results don't turn out as we planned 6 months or 12 months down the road, then the group is willing to reconvene as a team to review the parameters and change them as necessary, rather than just trying to identify and punish the guilty party that set them up incorrectly in the first place. I've shown you how the tool handles traditional reorder point replenishment with a fixed reorder quantity. Because of time constraints here, I wasn't able to show you some of the other capabilities and features of the tool, but it also supports an order up to method where you can have variable reorder quantities. It'll handle standard issue multiples where you say always use 2 at a time or always use 6 at a time. It has the capability to incorporate open order data, which really only impacts the front end of the profile. And it also includes several predefined warnings to help make sure you don't set up stocking parameters that just simply don't make any sense or incorporate way too much risk. The tool can be customized to be compatible with the basic functionality of different systems. For example, the logic can be changed so that the model assumes replenishment orders aren't triggered until the on-hand goes below the reorder point, which is the way some systems are set up. Field names can be changed to coincide with what's in different systems, and this isn't just as simple as typing different words into the tool. It requires some discussion to fully understand how a particular system handles replenishment and which fields actually impact the stocking level. For example, is the reorder point in your system, is it actually called reorder point, or is it minimum quantity, or is it something else? Is the reorder quantity called reorder quantity, or is it maximum quantity? Is it EOQ? Is it lot size? Or again, something else? If there's a field that's called safety stock, does it actually do anything, or is it just parametric data? And if there's a planned lead time as well as an actual calculated lead time, which one should we use for planning purposes? We've actually had several users that have given us ideas that have already been incorporated into the tool I've just shown you, and we continue to entertain additional suggestions for improvements that will make it even better. We've actually also had one company who did their own customization, adding a place to enter a part number and then using lookup tables to query and populate stocking parameters, transaction information, other part master data from their own data warehouse for the item when the part number was entered. So hopefully by now you're either thinking, well, this is the stupidest thing I ever saw, or maybe, I could get some use out of this. Well, if you're in the former group, that's fine. I never said this was for everyone. It's just something that I found to be extremely useful. If you're in the latter group, you may be wondering, well, how can I try this myself? Well, if you're interested in more information or getting your own version of the tool, please get in touch with Dan Anderson at the Lifecycle Institute. Dan's listening in on the webinar, I think, and I'm sure he'd be more than happy to discuss the details with you. His contact information is shown on the slide here. But like I said before, this isn't a magic bullet. It's a tool, and like any tool, you have to learn how to use it properly. If you do, I think you can get a lot of benefit out of it. In fact, we've received some great feedback from a couple of customers who say they've been able to use it to generate significant inventory reductions with no loss of service. And maybe more importantly, they also say it's improved communication and teamwork between maintenance and operations and the materials management functions of stores and purchasing. And that's also critical. So if you use a tool like this effectively, I think you'll find you can do a much better job of managing your inventory rather than just looking into your crystal ball or letting your inventory manage you.